The MMWR report on preventable premature deaths in the U.S. from 2010 to 2022 highlights significant trends and disparities in mortality across urban and rural regions. It suggests systemic issues that could align with the hypothesis that environmental factors, such as contaminants like pesticides and fertilizers, may contribute to adverse health outcomes. Here's an analysis based on the report's findings. Key points relevant to hypothesis. 1. Increased rural mortality rates. Not metropolitan rural counties consistently had higher percentages of preventable premature deaths compared to metropolitan areas. These disparities are particularly significant in causes like heart disease, cancer, stroke, and chronic lower respiratory disease (CLRD), all of which may be influenced by environmental exposures. 2. Environmental factors as risk multipliers. Rural areas often face higher exposure to agricultural chemicals, including pesticides and fertilizers, which can accumulate in soil, water, and air. Chronic exposure to such chemicals is linked to respiratory diseases, for example, CLRD, cardiovascular conditions, and certain cancers. 3. Cancer trends. Preventable cancer deaths decreased nationwide but remained significantly higher in rural counties. Pesticides have been associated with cancers such as lymphoma, leukemia, and certain solid tumors, which are more prevalent in areas with extensive agriculture. 4. Chronic lower respiratory disease (CLRD). CLRD deaths decreased in urban areas but remained steady or increased slightly in rural areas, highlighting possible ongoing exposure to airborne pollutants and toxins from agricultural activities. 5. Heart disease and stroke. Premature deaths from heart disease and stroke increased in rural areas post-2020, potentially linked to environmental stressors and lack of access to preventative care. Pesticide exposure has been associated with increased risks of hypertension and stroke. 6. Unintentional injuries. Sharp increases in preventable deaths from unintentional injuries, including poisoning, may reflect growing issues with agricultural chemical mishandling or indirect exposure. Potential role of fertilizers and pesticides. 1. Chemical drift and residues. Persistent use of fertilizers and pesticides in farming communities can contaminate drinking water and food supplies. Known contaminants, for example, nitrates, atrazine, have been linked to cancers, endocrine disorders, and respiratory issues. 2. Bioaccumulation. Prolonged low-dose exposure may lead to chronic illnesses over time, particularly in communities with inadequate mitigation measures, such as poorly regulated agricultural runoff. 3. Epigenetic and long-term effects. Studies show that exposure to pesticides can cause epigenetic changes that elevate the risk of diseases like cancer and cardiovascular conditions, which may manifest years later.